Selina Kyle is Catwoman, the greatest cat burglar in Gotham City. She is one of the classic Batman villains, and she has even become one of his most important allies and occasional romantic partner. But that was not always the case. The relationship between Batman and Catwoman has been complicated since the very beginning of the Golden Age of comics, but for the most part, they have always been attracted to each other. However, in the early 90s, their relationship started to change. The creators back then didn't really like the idea of Batman and Catwoman together, and in this story, we get a glimpse of what happens when Batman and Catwoman hate each other. The story is called Catwoman Defiant. It was published in 1992, written by Peter Milligan and illustrated by Tom Greenberg, with a spectacular cover by Brian Stelfreeze. This is the first graphic novel with Catwoman as the main character. DC Comics had previously published a 4-issue miniseries featuring Catwoman, in which her origin story was updated and expanded. However, that story came out in 1989, and 3 years later, it was time to get Catwoman back in the spotlight. The story features what would become the most iconic Catwoman logo of the 90s, and my personal favorite. The artist Tom Greenberg had previously worked in Batman in a graphic novel called Bride of the Demon. His art adds a Bronze Age flavor to the 90s comics, which is honestly quite effective. The writer, Peter Milligan, had recently finished his run in the main Batman and Detective comics, where he wrote the iconic Dark Knight, Dark City, the controversial Idiot storyline, and also created Blackgate Penitentiary. Milligan brought darkness, mystery and horror to the Batman comics. His stories were almost like episodes of The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror, with supernatural elements and surprise endings. This Catwoman story is no different. It begins when Catwoman is attacked by a group of men wearing good-looking men masks. She manages to take down a couple of them, but soon she is outnumbered. Batman shows up in time to save her because he needs her. But not in that way. Batman explains that these men are called the Model Army, a group of henchmen working for the mysterious Mr. Handsome, who wants to kidnap Catwoman. Batman needs Catwoman, alright, but only as bait in order to find Mr. Handsome and stop him. Mr. Handsome is a mysterious new enemy who wears a mask with a handsome face. Mr. Handsome would send his henchmen to get valuable and priceless art pieces so that he could admire their beauty, but ever since his wife died, all he wanted to do was to destroy everything that is beautiful. Mr. Handsome thinks that Catwoman is the most beautiful thing in Gotham, and that's why he wants to capture her, so that he can destroy her. Batman starts following Catwoman, but the Model Army distracts him long enough for them to capture Catwoman and take her to Mr. Handsome's hideout. Catwoman is taken to an old abandoned mine where she is shackled to a heavy statue so that she doesn't escape. Inside the mine, there is a monstrous creature that will tear Catwoman apart if she doesn't find a way out. Catwoman is helped by one of Mr. Handsome's victims, who has managed to survive inside the mine, away from the monster. They work together to get out, but before they can reach safety, the other person falls back to the mine, and her last wish is for Catwoman to kill Mr. Handsome. This gets Catwoman in an interesting position. Up until that moment, Catwoman always refused to kill. She is a criminal, for sure, but she had never crossed that line. Considering all the terrible things that Mr. Handsome has done, Catwoman thinks about it for a second. But in the end, she doesn't kill him. Catwoman remains faithful to her own code, showing us that she is strong enough to fight her own battles. There is one little thing that I didn't like about this Catwoman: the outfit. They were still trying to use the costume from Batman Year One, but in this story it feels a bit ridiculous, especially the whiskers and the tail. It looks like a terrible Halloween costume or a badly designed pajama. I was never fond of this costume for Catwoman, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. However, the story is so exciting and entertaining that I ended up forgetting about the costume. This is a good thriller with action, mystery, suspense, and a dark atmosphere. Reading the story is a lot of fun, and that's why I'm not going to reveal the surprise ending in case you want to read the story. I will say though that Batman eventually finds Catwoman and the story ends with her outsmarting him. The dynamics between Batman and Catwoman are interesting. This story is unique because it doesn't have the classic trope of Batman and Catwoman flirting around and playing cat and mouse. There are no innuendos or double meanings. In this story, they just don't like each other. Catwoman is not slightly interested in Batman, and he feels nothing but despicable contempt for Catwoman. They bicker and quarrel constantly, almost like an old married couple, except there is no love here. I can't recall any other story where these two don't get along, and I think it's refreshing. I may be in the minority here, but I don't care about Batman and Catwoman together. I just don't like it. What I do like is the characterization of Batman. After Catwoman is kidnapped, Batman gets one of the criminals and takes him to the Batcave, where he is surrounded by bats and darkness. The criminal is so terrified that he tells Batman everything that he wants to know. And that is excellent. In the story, both Catwoman and Alfred suggest that Batman should beat the hell out of the criminals to get information, but that's not how Batman works. His methods of intimidation have a more psychological nature, and they are most effective. Instead of breaking their bodies, Batman breaks their minds, without the need for physical violence. That's the Batman I like to see, and that's why I really like Catwoman Defiant. The main theme of the story is about the fear of aging, of getting old and losing our youth. It's a strange theme, but considering how much attention is given to Batman, Catwoman and the narrative, it's very easy to lose yourself in the story. In the year before this story was published, Catwoman appeared only once in the Batman comics, and it was a rather weak story featuring Vicky Vale. However, DC decided to make this the first Catwoman graphic novel because Batman Returns was about to be released. They wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the second Batman movie by releasing stories featuring the villains, and since Catwoman was not the only villain of that movie, they also released a graphic novel with the Penguin. Both of these stories were published simultaneously, and you can watch my video about the Penguin story right now. Just click on the screen and join me for Penguin Triumphant. And in the next video, finally, we are taking a look at Batman Returns and the comic adaptation. If that sounds interesting to you, then make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so that you don't miss the next upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.